Welcome. Are we ready to start? Yeah. So, welcome to this session on advancing knowledge exchange for the Open Government Partnership. Yeah? Okay. So we are going to try to make this a very interactive session. By the end of the session, we actually want to come up with recommendations together on how we can scale up knowledge sharing for OGP. So we're all going to be working. There is going to be a little bit of listening, but then later on we'll be working together. Basically, the premise for this session, or the starting point, is was very nicely expressed yesterday by President Dilma. She said, every country, in the context of OGP, every country has something to share, and every country has something to learn. So basically, in this fairly nicely defined area of the OGP, where we have the 5 challenges, where we have the action plans, where we have a defined set of partners, we have a potential marketplace for sharing of experiences. And when people put in commitments and action plans, they're actually formulating a demand to learn from others. Because if you're going to do something, you commit to do something, probably you first want to find out from others who already have done something similar. Yeah? So basically, we are creating a huge opportunity for knowledge exchange in what you could see is some sort of a microcosm. The question then is, how do we make this happen? How do we scale this up? How can we, 2 years from now, look back and say, yes, we put in place the right mechanisms, the right tools, the right methods, the right behaviors, so that in the end, we made this knowledge sharing possible. Yeah? That's kind of the idea behind this session. And at the end of this session, we then want to have maybe a fairly concrete set of recommendations for ourselves, for the OGP, and others. We can talk about them. We can make sure we submit them to the OGP steering committee, and we can also take them back to our organizations and see what we, from where we sit, can do to make this happen. Yeah? So this session is not about what knowledge we're going to share. This session is about how we are going to make this knowledge sharing happen. I think that's a very important focus. This is not about the thematic areas of the OGP, this is about the mechanism for sharing knowledge. That's what we're trying to have a crack at today. Yeah? I want to invite and thank the panelists who are here. So we have Pak Prayoga from Indonesia. He's the director of the President's Delivery Unit, and I'll introduce his presentation in a moment. We have Miguel Pulido, who is the executive director of Fundar in Mexico. We have Stella Mokan, who is the executive director of the e-government center in Moldova. And we have Eric Braverman, who is partner at McKinsey & Co. So they're going to bring a nice combination of experiences and lessons learned in knowledge sharing from different perspectives, different types of countries. We'll have different knowledge exchanges that are going on or have happened in the past. We have a government perspective, we have a civil society perspective, we have a private sector perspective. So we'll be listening to those things first, and then in the second hour, we'll make it an active session where we are going to think through together how to come up with those recommendations. Myself, I am Hans Freters. I'm not what is written here. I am the practice manager for knowledge exchange in the World Bank, and I belong to the World Bank Institute. So knowledge exchange, what is knowledge exchange? Why does the World Bank have a practice group on knowledge exchange? I'll just take 2 minutes to explain this and to give a little bit of context. Knowledge exchange for us is really about the how-to knowledge, the tacit knowledge, the knowledge about how reforms take place. It's the knowledge that is in people's heads rather than the knowledge that is in academic books or in reports or in studies. It's the knowledge that you find out when you talk to someone who has gone through the experience himself or herself. That is why we call it knowledge exchange. We very often also call it peer learning, peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, practitioner exchange. Those are all terms that we use through each other, and it's really a very important distinction to be made between codifiable what knowledge and the not so codifiable how-to knowledge that comes out when you talk to people and when people talk about their experiences. So knowledge that doesn't come through you through an intermediary or a book or an academic or a report writer, knowledge that comes to you directly from the person who has the knowledge. So that is a knowledge exchange, and why did the World Bank decide 2.5 years ago to set up an entire practice group around this with a budget and a manager and staff, etc. So the reason why this happened is that we're in the midst of a fastly evolving development landscape, as you know. So traditionally, development was purely about north-south transfer, if you want. Yeah? So the north, the rich north, would provide finance, aid to developing countries, and it would come with prescriptions on how to use the money. Yeah? So it was transfer of prescriptions, of knowledge, transfer of money that would go from the north to the south. Over the last few years, the world has dramatically opened up, and we see in this conference what some of the interesting consequences of that are. But in the field of development, we see this as well. Our clients, the clients that the World Bank wants to work with, don't no longer ask for that many reports. They don't always ask for, give us a report on how we can reform our education sector, give us a report on how we can lead decentralization, give us a report on how we can implement open data in our country or open government. They're asking to learn from other countries. And the World Bank, in an attempt to remain relevant with clients that are ever more sophisticated, with more sophisticated demands, has understood that in addition to being a provider of money, and in addition to being a producer of knowledge and reports, it also needs to become a broker of knowledge, yeah, to respond to our client demands. And that's why we created in the bank this group, this practice group, that is developing an operational knowledge broker or a knowledge connector role for the World Bank group. And then this has a very strong internal dimension, obviously, because it's a change process for World Bank staff. When World Bank staff interact with their clients in the field, on the ground, they have to have an operational instrument that allows them to be connecting this client to another country, while in the past, the normal instruments that the World Bank staff would have would really be writing a report, doing a study, giving policy advice, etc., really tapping the knowledge in the head of the staff and giving that to the client. Now it's a different role. The staff, the World Bank staff, does not necessarily need to know everything. The staff needs to know where the knowledge resides, which knowledge can be relevant for which situation. The staff need to become knowledge brokers instead of experts in certain thematic areas. And so this is an important change process in the bank, and it's part of a larger agenda. It's called the modernization agenda. There's also very strong drivers outside the bank for this thing. As countries become more sophisticated, as they're more middle-income countries that are getting out of this low-income country status, these countries more and more have an interest in sharing actively what they have learned, the successes they have had. It's one way for middle-income countries to become active, to become donors, to be in touch with other countries, really sharing the experience of their own development successes. There is some business interest behind this. If India exports its knowledge on building up an IT sector, then later on it can also lead to business for IT companies in Africa, for example. But there's also an authentic desire to share the experiences about the successes they have had as a way of engaging internationally. On the demand side, countries really want to learn from other countries. If you're a country that is considering to put in place social safety nets or social protection, it's probably not a wise thing to go and learn from France these days. It's probably a wiser thing to go and learn from Mexico or Chile or Brazil on how they did it much more recently with relevant instruments and tools. If you want to learn about how to strengthen dairy supply chain, for example, and how to make sure milk gets to the customer in a way that it doesn't lose all the milk on the way, it's probably better to go and learn from India, who achieved successes in this recently, than to go to any other academic source of knowledge that is around. So on the demand and the supply side, there are strong drivers for this global knowledge sharing to take place. And then it's a question for international organizations like the bank: what's your role? How can you serve your clients better by turning being a knowledge broker into an operational service? So that's a little bit where we're coming from when we look at OGP as a very important development instrument, if you want, and a very important partnership, and we see the enormous opportunities for knowledge sharing in this context, we also ask ourselves the question, how can we support, right? And so this is, this panel, we really want to delve into that. What are the ways, the methods, the technologies, the tools that we can use to really scale up within the OGP context this knowledge sharing? So we have 3 practical examples that we're going to listen to first, and then we'll conclude with some lessons learned more generally about knowledge sharing. So without further ado, I just want to delve into them. My suggestion would be, let's listen to all of them. They're going to talk not more than 10 minutes each. We'll have some Q&A at the end, and the second hour will turn into an interactive session where we all go in brainstorming mode. It will be the second half hour in a sense, because we've been asked to make the session a little shorter so that we can make up for the time. So, Prayoga, the floor is yours.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you, Han. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, this is probably one case or one model of so many models out there about knowledge exchange. And we haven't reached a big success yet, because this is still work in progress. So we are still in the implementation phase of this so-called project. But there are indeed some early wins or early successes that we can probably share, and some backgrounds on how we did it, probably. Well, probably before I start, I'll have to say I'm sorry for my limited English. So if you find it a bit unclear, just shout or raise your hand. I will probably repeat my presentation. So this is a case in education sector, and education is one of the very important sectors in my country, because we have more than 250,000 schools, from elementary school, junior to up to high schools, and education sector receives about, or more than 20% of our national budgets. So it's a huge fund is allocated in the education sector, yet we haven't been able to really put full transparency and full accountability into this. And one of the reasons is because we are an archipelagic country, so these schools are spread in thousands of islands, and we are dealing with local governments, and since we are a developing country, so you might expect that there are also some capacity issue there. So looking at these situations, we look around to our neighbors, and we found that Philippines, as you can see in the screen there, it has some sort of a similar situations where there are more than 90 million population, so it's a huge country, also an archipelagic country, 7,000 islands, a lot of schools, and they face similar situations in which they have frustrations instead of education, weak system of informations, access and feedback, and lastly, uninvolved citizens. This is what they claim that their problems are. I think, and this is very much relevant to our situations in Indonesia. So this is a story about Indonesia trying to replicate what the Philippines have accomplished in their education sector. So provided these situations, they have one success story, and that is this Check My School platform. So what is it? It's a web-based citizens involvement, also government involved there, type of platform, let's say, where people can actually contribute to the data, to the monitoring, to the evaluations of the conditions of schools, including all the schools ecosystems, like the teachers, the school conditions, the environment, the students themselves, and so on and so forth. So this is we consider this as a very successful model, since they have engaged stakeholders using this platform, rapidly growing coverage of regions and schools using this. So they are selling this platform quite well. And then a successful grassroots volunteer model, where this has been one of the most common issues in the developing country. You're trying to engage grassroots, but then you keep failing and failing because of different reasons. But when it comes to this, they have a quite successful success story. So, and we wanted to know how they did it. And then, of course, successful CSO and public and government collaborations. Again, this has been always a challenge in a developing country where trust and visions are always in conflict. And lastly, they have this successful campaign model. So we're trying to, we were thinking, why not replicate this instead of starting from scratch? This is already working. We have similar situations and conditions. The ecosystems is similar. So why not just replicate? So that is what we're trying to achieve given the similar situations. Educations in Indonesia and in the Philippines both faces challenges such as, sometimes there are not a very consistent number of teachers. They claim that they have so many, they have this many teachers, but then the reality say otherwise. Status of the teachers, their credentials, their teaching quality, teachers' attendance have always been a problem. School properties like seats, tables, toilets, books and computers. In the developing country situation, these have always been a major source of problems when it comes to teaching or education's quality, and so on and so forth. And these are just the basics. We haven't mentioned about ratios, performance, how they use their fund and all that. So similar situations between Indonesia and the Philippines. So again, we were thinking, why not replicate this? But then, the only problem is that Indonesia is a much bigger country and a more complex problem there. As I mentioned earlier, we have 240,000 schools and 18,000 islands, 200 languages and so on and so forth. We have just entered a decentralized political system where local powers are now really in charge. A local political influence is very intense, and there are indications of budget misuse. So that is the challenge of implementing the success model of the Philippines in Indonesia context. So not only we are trying to replicate, but we are trying to replicate and expand this success model. The biggest barrier in replicating such model is domestic political barrier. So the political will is really the biggest challenge. So we have this initiative led by CSO, an NGO there is leading the implementations of Check My School model in Indonesia. As you can expect, there are problems when it comes to trust, views, and who should do what inside the governments and outside the governments. So it's pretty tense situations. Not only that because, sorry, not only that because this is a foreign model that we are trying to implement in the domestic environment, but we already have some conflicting situations to begin with. So it's quite a big challenge. So we help. We here, the President's Delivery Unit, we try to debottleneck this the problems we have here through session facilitations, involving all stakeholders, both government and CSOs, including some elements of the societies. I think not only that at the time that we were involved, but we also called the Philippines-based organization, which is leading the implementation of the Check My School in the Philippines. So we were both hand in hand, trying to, let's say, tame the domestic situations in Indonesia, trying to get everybody's agreement or buy-in, and trying to build trust and align all the visions and all the understanding. So I think it went well doing that. So we held some discussions, focus group discussions, involving all the stakeholders, including again the Philippine-based NGO there, explaining the benefits, the immediate gains that both governments and the society can claim if you implement this well. So, and we held these sessions several times with the governments, with the NGOs, with the elements of societies, until they really believe in our effort, and this is a genuine effort. So, without having their trust, we cannot start yet. It's basically the principle. And so, after doing this several times, finally it went well, and as a result, a plan is obtained and agreed. This is a plan to implement the Check My School program in Indonesia situation. We have ministries committed to this, CSOs committed, not only advocating, but really they are implementing the Check My School in Indonesia. And I can say that deployment has begun. And anytime there's a problem or bottlenecks, the President's Delivery Unit is ready to step in and try and help to debottleneck the issues. So I think some lessons from that is because this is early stage, knowledge exchange between OGP members will always be a trial and error type of efforts. Sorry. So therefore, for OGP member to start exchanging knowledge, it's important to begin with low-hanging fruits, and to avoid initiatives that are too much of big risks, because you can be easily discouraged by early failures. So easy start. Common issue like education is a common issue for so many developing countries, especially probably in this case southern part of the world. And start with low investment initiatives that have low investments, early gain, easy entry and exit. You can exit this type of program anytime without having too much political risk. And probably you can start to implement this in easy regions, if you like, where there are not so many resistance and where you can see the possibilities of success are high. Also, we should, I think, always be reminded that we have to be focused on the process rewards instead of the end success, because the process rewards itself is a success, like trust and aligned visions. I think we should appreciate or acknowledge those type of successes. And again, lastly, neutral, influential, and capable facilitator is always a big help. In this case, the President's Delivery Unit, and then there was also World Bank and World Bank Institute played some role there. So I think that's pretty much from me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You set the tone completely right. This is very interesting. Let's give her a round of applause. Fascinating. So let's just move on. Miguel, please go ahead.
Thanks.
I'm afraid it's not working. Okay, so I'm afraid this is going to be funny because I'm going to speak in Spanish, so I don't see, I'm not sure if everybody understands Spanish, and the other thing that is failing to me, it is that the internet is not working, so I prepared a presentation, and so I want to apologize with everybody if somebody is not going to understand the presentation. Probably we can have a conversation after this panel. And just to prove that I prepare a presentation.
We believe you.
It's impressive, and it was really modern. I don't know, because I don't have the connector, you know. Bueno. ¿De Mac? Bueno, ahora tengo el texto preparado, vamos a hacerlo más fluido y gracias.
Okay, so the translation is on channel 4 to English, right? Yeah, channel 4.
Bueno, ahora acabo de recordar a mi madre que me decía, nunca te esfuerces demasiado, porque las cosas pueden fallar. Hay que hacerlo fluido y fácil. Y bueno, yo compartiré con ustedes 3 ideas que surgen de la práctica de la organización en la que yo trabajo. Por lo que me veo obligado por principio a compartir con ustedes que las experiencias que compartiré, pues justo tienen 2 sesgos, ¿no? Un sesgo que es la mirada desde sociedad civil, y el segundo sesgo es que, por supuesto, Fundar no representa la mirada de toda la sociedad civil, ¿no? Es la experiencia que compartiré, se limita a lo que desde mi organización hemos podido aprender. Y el primer punto es reconocer que actualmente existen diversas iniciativas, existe un contexto favorable de iniciativas internacionales para avanzar en el tema de transparencia. Estos proyectos multiactor han juntado a gobiernos, organizaciones de la sociedad civil, instituciones multilaterales y donantes internacionales que confluyen con objetivos comunes, con propósitos similares, aunque hay que tenerlo claro, con antecedentes institucionales distintos.
Just one quick thing, it's channel 2, not channel 4, channel 2.
Porque aunque podamos coincidir en... Esto es sabotaje, todo me está fallando. Aunque podamos coincidir en los propósitos y en los fines, pues el hecho de que las naturalezas de nuestras organizaciones sean distintas, hay que tenerlo en cuenta, no porque sea un obstáculo, sino porque es una referencia que se tiene que considerar. Estos procesos de aprendizaje, que estas oportunidades de aprendizaje horizontal que se están dando y que tenemos en este contexto global, a nosotros nos han llevado a pensar en 3 modalidades de intervención. Abordo inmediatamente la primera y trataré de describirla con mis palabras lo más equivalente a la gráfica que tenía presentada. La modalidad primera es la construcción de ambientes propicios para el intercambio. Y esta modalidad de aprendizaje horizontal se distingue porque de lo que se trata es de la vinculación y de la articulación entre actores. Concretamente, lo que buscamos es que aquellos que tienen la información y el conocimiento ya sistematizado y que ya esté listo para compartir pueda ser otorgado, pueda ser facilitado para aquellos que tienen necesidades que empatan con esta idea. Y si bien reconocemos que no tiene nada de novedoso, ni de inédito, ni de espectacular nuestra aproximación, lo que sí hemos tratado de hacer es reflexionar por qué, si este pensamiento sistémico de conectar aquellos que ofrecen con aquellos que necesitan ya existe, ¿por qué no funciona? Y uno de nuestros aprendizajes ha sido que muchas veces lo que hace falta es una intermediación adecuada. Lo que nosotros hemos hecho es ubicar quiénes son los aliados del trabajo de Fundar, con quienes nosotros compartimos ya una agenda de trabajo, con quienes tenemos una confianza interinstitucional, qué organizaciones confían en nosotros en qué organizaciones confiamos, y después funcionar como puente. Con esta simple idea hicimos apenas hace algunas semanas, en marzo, el 23 de marzo en la Ciudad de México, un encuentro entre organizaciones de América Latina para discutir distintos temas sobre OGP, apoyados por 4 donantes y también con distintas naturalezas, con distintos objetivos institucionales. Pudimos juntar a 8 redes, una red mexicana, que es el Colectivo por la Transparencia, y 7 redes latinoamericanas, a las que lo que tienen en común esas redes no es su agenda temática, sino que fundar pertenece a todas. Entonces, en México hay una expresión para definir cuando uno participa en demasiadas cosas, es muy local, pero se dice que uno es chile de todos los moles, ¿no? Entonces, prácticamente fundar pertenece a este conjunto de redes latinoamericanas y lo que hicimos fue juntarlas con un solo punto de agenda, que todas fueran a compartir y que todas fueran en el ánimo de preguntar. Las que más tuvieran necesidades de aprender fueron con sus preguntas. No hubo un esquema de exposiciones, no hubo un panel como este, sino lo que creamos fueron espacios, conversatorios, sesiones de trabajo, sesiones de grupo, en donde de manera natural lo que fluía eran las preguntas y en algunas ocasiones las respuestas. En otras ocasiones incluso la confirmación de que otras personas están preguntando lo mismo. Muchas organizaciones nos estamos preguntando cuál va a ser el alcance de OGP, cómo se lleva esto con las agendas que nosotros ya teníamos en los temas de transparencia, etcétera. Esa es la primera modalidad de intercambio a la que hemos definido como la construcción de ambientes propicios para el aprendizaje horizontal. La segunda es la articulación de procesos en función de una coyuntura específica. Y aquí lo que distingue esta modalidad de trabajo es la temporalidad de la alianza. El ejemplo a propósito de OGP o de OGP que tenemos nosotros en México es que un grupo de organizaciones invitados originalmente por el Gobierno de México y por el Instituto Federal de Acceso a la Información, que es la instancia que integra la representación oficial mexicana, nos juntamos y todos compartimos el deseo de participar en la Alianza por los Gobiernos Abiertos. Todos compartimos la idea de sacar el mayor provecho para nuestra agenda, pero no tenemos la misma agenda de largo plazo. Algunas organizaciones tienen una agenda, vamos, la sociedad civil no tiene que ser monolítica, y esta diversidad no estorba para la posibilidad de aprendizajes comunes. Lo que hicimos fue construir grupos de trabajo en donde dejamos que el liderazgo natural de aquellos que trabajan con mayor solvencia los temas fuera compartido con las otras organizaciones que tienen un ímpetu, una decisión de participar, pero que probablemente no tienen el conocimiento para hacerlo. Y la coyuntura nos permite hacer esa alianza, ir en bloque, trabajar conjuntos, pero no solo trabajar conjuntamente en el sentido político de la alianza, sino en el sentido del conocimiento, que es lo que estamos compartiendo en esta mesa. Y eso nos ha permitido a algunos grupos aprender en esa coyuntura específica mucho más rápido de otros, y sobre todo nos parece que a eso nos ha permitido a los grupos mostrarle al gobierno que tenemos capacidad de propuesta y capacidad de intervención con conocimiento específico. Y la tercera modalidad es la construcción de redes. Y aquí me parece que la característica es obvia. A diferencia del proceso anterior, lo que distingue al trabajo de redes es que la articulación es sostenida y que tiene una perspectiva de duración en el tiempo, de estabilidad a lo largo del tiempo. Las redes a las que les describí hace unos minutos que invitamos a México forman parte de ese proceso en donde Fundar integra esas redes bajo una reflexión muy sencilla. Las necesidades que nosotros enfrentamos y los problemas públicos que nosotros enfrentamos en México requieren de un conjunto de soluciones que por mucho superan nuestra capacidad para generarlas. Y lo que hacemos es simplificar el modelo de aprendizaje y de aplicación del conocimiento. Perteneciendo a las redes tenemos la oportunidad de tener acceso directo a conocimiento, experiencias prácticas, incluso, aunque no se suele decir, no solo a los éxitos, sino también a los fracasos y a los errores que han cometido otros colegas. De esa forma nosotros también les compartimos a los colegas que integran las redes nuestros éxitos, que es lo que más nos gusta a todos platicar, pero de cuando en cuando también nuestros fracasos, que es lo que por deber ético y moral también tenemos que aprender a decir. Y en ese proceso de maduración del conocimiento, que va en una agenda que tiene mucha mayor estabilidad y que tiene una perspectiva de largo aliento, vamos juntos y no solo por echar montón, no solo por volumen, sino por calidad, porque justo el conocimiento nos hace mejorar nuestras intervenciones. Este es el caso de las redes a las que pertenecemos, la Red Latinoamericana de Transparencia en Industrias Extractivas, la Red Latinoamericana de Transparencia Presupuestaria, la Red Latinoamericana de Transparencia Legislativa. Como verán, todas son redes latinoamericanas de transparencia y ya después viene el apellido, ¿no? Y la Alianza Regional, que sí se distingue por la creatividad de su nombre, la Alianza Regional por la Libertad de Expresión y de Información. Estas redes y el trabajo que nosotros tenemos en ella justo nos hace participar en OGP usando el proceso cognitivo que les describí hace rato, es decir, la oportunidad de aprender de manera más rápida de los otros colegas. En suma, estas tres modalidades de aprendizaje, yo terminaría caracterizándolas con algo que para nosotros es muy relevante. Primero, las alianzas están al servicio de la utilidad práctica que puedan tener. Es decir, la idea de estas tres modalidades de intercambio de conocimiento tienen un espíritu detrás de sí práctico, no pragmático, pero sí de implementación posible. Segundo, están basadas en un criterio de aprendizaje horizontal. Lo que para nosotros es relevante es entendernos como pares, aceptarnos todos como pares, independientemente de las diferencias de trayectorias entre instituciones o entre colegas, o independientemente de las necesidades o de los vacíos que se puedan tener entre colegas. Somos pares, aunque unos sean expertos y otros seamos inexpertos. Somos pares que estamos ahí justo por aprovechar la oportunidad de aprendizaje con un sentido práctico, que es la idea primera que les decía. Y una tercera consideración que tienen los procesos que les acabo de escribir es que evidentemente todos son desde sociedad civil con una intención de incidir en la agenda gubernamental. Espero haber sido moderadamente descriptivo. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you, Miguel. So thank you for a very interesting presentation. So you talked about it, and some of us didn't have headsets, so I just do a quick the headlines as I take them away from your presentation, which is really interesting. So you talked about three modalities of knowledge sharing that you are supporting out of your organization. And what all these modalities have in common is that they're really about practical knowledge sharing. Yeah, not the academic type of knowledge, but really practical knowledge sharing. It's really fundamentally about horizontal learning. It's about all people are equal, all people have things to share and to learn. So that's kind of a fundamental principle behind it. And the goal is learning among civil society to influence government action. And so you described three of those modalities. One was starting from the consideration that there is some sort of a market failure. There's so many experiences to be shared, so many experiences to be learned or demand for learning. Why is it not happening systematically? So you've organized some sort, or one modality that you use is some sort of knowledge sharing events where people come together and where this demand and supply for learning is expressed in a more systematic way and then captured. You talked about another modality, which are alliances around more shorter-term learning goals where people come together to really learn about a specific practical topic on a somewhat longer term, but not necessarily on the longest term, because there might be different end goals for the different organizations involved, but you can have a shorter term learning goal that you share and around which you can build an alliance. And then you talked about networks, which are really really mechanisms for longer term learning where people, where the knowledge becomes more and more mature, where there's always continuous access to the lessons learned, the successes and the failures of others. So this was very interesting, and I might not have done fully justice to your presentation, but later on we'll have opportunity to ask some questions. So let us move on to the next presentation. Stella, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Han. The government of Moldova has benefited fully from the knowledge exchange platforms, mechanisms that were provided either by the World Bank or other development partners, and of the knowledge mechanism of the Open Government Partnership. But I would like to focus on the two questions that you raised in the beginning on what should the knowledge exchange focus, and on how to make the knowledge exchange efficient and useful for, in this case, for our country. and for our partners in other countries. We used the knowledge exchange mechanism, first of all, to define the key pillars of our governance e-transformation agenda. In 2010, the government decided to use ICT to improve the government efficiency and improve the public service delivery. So since then, we've started a very complex agenda of bringing ICT, of digitizing public services, of digitizing the internal government operations and processes, excluding paper, excluding inefficiency, and so on. And actually, this was one of the key focus of our interactions, communications, exchanges with our key partners from different countries. The second key focus for our interactions tried to connect different stakeholders, not only from the government, but also from the civil society, from the private sector, from media. Because you cannot launch and you cannot have a sustainable change process unless you have several partners, or as many partners as possible, on board with you, understanding what you want to do, discussing together what should be the shared objectives of this change agenda, and also commit together on implementing this change. For us, the knowledge exchange also provided some tools to fill in the knowledge gaps. Because what you mentioned, change now happens very fast. And we don't have as much time and the luxury actually to learn first and then implement. So through different seminars, networking events, we learned, we got this know-how, we improved our skills, thank you, and the skills and knowledge of our partners, and could move faster in implementing the objectives of our agenda. And also very important, all our initiatives require change, and how to manage this change, again, in government, in different ministries, different layers of government, how to connect this change with the change outside of the government. So these were the key priorities for us, but we tried to address through the knowledge exchange opportunities offered by different partners. And actually, as a result of all these interactions, as a result of these interactions, in 2010, the government of Moldova set up the e-government center, which plays the role of the government CIO office, and has been driving this governance e-transformation process. And again, it was a result of the knowledge exchange, but we had with our partners from the World Bank, from Singapore, from Estonia, from Belgium, UK, US, so we really benefited from the richness of knowledge and best practices. And we could learn from other countries' successes and, let's say, smaller successes in promoting the reform of the government. Again, we had the opportunity through the World Bank and through other partners to bring inspiring people to our country. We had the opportunities to organize tech camps, to organize public events where civil society representatives, young people, private sector, media, government, and in government, I would like to mention that we have in each ministry set up a network of government CIOs and focal points for opening up the government data. And all these people were always present in all our knowledge-sharing events, again, to learn how to do things differently in government. I would mention also the different international events and seminars and conferences where we always participated either online or in person, not alone as government representatives, but having our partners from the civil society and private sector. Because it's very important to, in driving the change process, it's very important not to walk alone. Because in this way, your speed is slower, and again, the sustainability of what you do is not ensured. To mention the Open Government Partnership, the Open Government Partnership for us was an excellent platform to boost the internal change agenda, the internal public sector reform agenda, connect with our peers worldwide, not we representatives of the government, but also our partners from the civil society. And we used extensively the networking mechanisms. We had tens of events, discussions, participation in different online dialogues, again, to connect with our partners worldwide to see what others are doing and what we can replicate in our country, not losing time to think about new innovative ideas and ways to implement them. Okay. Also, as part of our governance transformation agenda, we managed to bring to Moldova several initiatives that have been launched worldwide and implemented in other countries. As we followed the example of the US, the World Bank, and other countries, and organized app competitions. In 2011, we opened up the Open Data governmental portal, and we faced the same challenge as other countries, having the data but not being able to make this data consumable. So we launched an apps competition in partnerships with different stakeholders, and as a result, several apps were developed and are being used, again, by civil society but also by government. We opened last year also the public database, the public expenditure database. Again, it's an international initiative that has been implemented by the World Bank. And as a result of this initiative, more data is available on how the government spends its money, but also the civil society has the opportunity to see how this money is spent. And in May 2012, we are putting together with the World Bank and other partners an Open Government Innovation Week, where we'll have several events, Tech Camp, Apps Development Day, Data Journalism workshops. We'll have the seminar for government and civil society on how to use this data that is published on the public expenditure, in the public expenditure database. So different tools, different mechanisms that are used in other countries, we are replicating them again to make use of the knowledge that has been created worldwide. I would like to finish with the following conclusion that again we made as a result of our interaction with different partners. It's very important to use this knowledge exchange opportunities not only to bring what is going on global, but the global best practices, but try to connect these global initiatives to our local internal reform agendas. Because only in this case, the knowledge mechanisms will be successful, will respond to the needs that we face. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of fake. Yeah. It's important also to use these tools that we have available today, and we connect globally, to use these tools for the internal knowledge exchange, because internally in the country we also have lots of good knowledge, lots of good best practices, but need to be put in the circuit. I have a very small, a short video for you, which kind of help us to connect these local and global priorities.
For us, Open Government Partnership is about better communication with authorities, government transparency and efficiency, participatory community, use of technologies in public institutions, and fight against corruption. The Open Government Partnership is a global alliance of governments which commit to support and apply the principles of human rights, fight against corruption, promote transparency in governance, and bring innovations in government for the benefit of citizens. So far, the Open Government Partnership was signed by 38 governments. The government of Moldova is one of them and has embarked on Open Government agenda to bring the government closer to its citizens and make the government your government.
So it's one of the video spots that we have developed to, and they are online on YouTube, on the e-Government Center YouTube page, to tell the citizens about what we do, first of all, to connect what we do internally with what's going on globally and use these global efforts for change to boost our internal agenda for change. Because, again, you start a process, but the bottlenecks are so many that this change might stop or might be reversed, or its pace could be slower. So we use this kind of tools to stay tuned to what's going global and to what we do internally. We found out that they are very efficient and very and make it easy for the citizens and for other partners to understand what we are really doing, so speaking in the citizens' language. And I'd like to conclude with the following. Answering your question on how we make this knowledge exchange useful. First of all, by keeping the pace with the change itself, because everything is changing, and the tools that we use today to facilitate this knowledge exchange might change in 1 year, might change in 2 months. So really stay tuned and see how to use the change to promote change. And stay tuned to the needs of the key stakeholders in different countries. In this way, we'll have greater chances of success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stella. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, management consultants are often teased about our PowerPoint presentations, and so I'm slightly delighted to be the only panelist without one in this case. It's very rare for me. My name's Eric Braverman. I'm a partner with McKinsey & Company in Washington. I see that my tag here says McKinsey United States. That is actually where I was born, but McKinsey is a global firm, and we work with leaders of public, private, and civil society institutions all around the world on issues of strategy, organization, operations, and technology. So it's a great pleasure to be invited here to join you. My own work is primarily in working with government leaders on accelerating the transformation of government institutions through innovation. And through that work, have been conducting a global research effort alongside my colleague Alana Berkowitz in the back and others around the world that has been focusing on how governments can innovate in this time to do more with less. So I am also happy to see many of the countries represented here that we have interviewed as part of our series. It's a great pleasure to see you again and happy to be here. I was thinking about when the nature of this challenge around knowledge sharing became most personal for me, and I actually think, all levity aside, it came forward about 2 years ago in the early part of 2010 when I was in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Many of you may remember there was a very awful earthquake there in 2010 where hundreds of thousands of people died. The productive capacity of the city was literally brought to rubble. And the question of how, in such an awful moment, could we find information that was going to save people's lives was very present. You know, and in the early days, it took the form of where are the people literally that we want to save? And over time, it became, well, where are the biggest needs? How can we bring people back toward prosperity and into a situation where they can feel safe, secure, and looking positive toward the future? It was a big challenge. And at the moment, at the time, I thought to myself, wow, this is the most different experience that I or any advisor to government might face in thinking about how to handle such a situation. But as I sit here, and admittedly a situation that feels quite different in the capital of Brazil, an inspiringly growing nation, and with all of you, I find myself thinking much more about the similarities. One of the things that was most potent in Haiti was this question of, you know, how can governments make the most of what they have in constrained environments? And as I listen to the conversations we've been having today from these countries, I think to myself that innovation here, particularly in the pressure toward sharing information and openness, is very much about how do we think about doing more, meeting citizen expectations at a time where there are constraints that we have to manage. And that comes from different reasons in different places. Places where, you know, citizen demand is growing because the population is aging, in other places because there's a youth bulge. Situations where debt burdens over 110% of GDP constrain growth. Situations where complexity is growing by the minute. There are estimates that global data is growing 40% a year. In the US alone, there are 1,200 organizations working on national security issues. All of these things paint a special challenge for government that make knowledge sharing even more important. You know, second lesson I really took from Haiti was the special power of government working with the civil society and the private sector to make change possible. In that case, it was civil society organizations that really took the lead in finding where people were buried, using creative knowledge sharing techniques around, you know, through crowdsourcing methods to find out where people were, putting those online, allowing both the U.S. Marines and other people in the private sector and civil society to act quickly. It was a very inspiring case. So I won't talk about all of the ways in which the public sector really drives this kind of effective knowledge sharing, because I think my colleagues on the panel have done so ably. I'd be happy to talk more about that after. But might make just a few framing remarks about how we see that working in the private sector and what lessons there might be for the public sector, really as a way to stimulate discussion. I'd really like to frame three things for us to think about here today. One is that in the course of finding information to be shared, of course, there is the challenge of, do we have the knowledge that we want to be shared, and how is it codified, which is, I think, for another time, but a big challenge. And so in the question of how are we going to use it, three things. First, how do we make the information that we want to share really personal for people? Not just real, but personal. How do we translate it into things that they can use, not just in the abstract, but in their day-to-day lives? Individual governments, for example, face this change problem all the time when they try to make a change in strategy, and yet there are large bureaucracies that are already organized to do one thing. So how do you actually change what people do? One of the most important lessons is you actually have to change it to the level of every person. You can't just tell them, here's what we're trying to do at the top. You actually have to help them understand what they're doing personally. That takes both kind of passive and active forms. You know, in passive forms, people use things like predictive algorithms like you see in Netflix for video sharing, or Amazon.com for those of you that have online access to online shopping. I mean, there are ways in which people can bring forward, before you even ask for it, what information do you want to use and how. Those are critical. Another is speaking in languages that people can understand. So using video techniques, short clips that allow people to learn. I mean, there are a lot of studies that show how people learn through an oral tradition. So how do you think about using the kind of video challenges that manufacturer Pratt & Whitney is actually pretty good at this. I think there are more active strategies that governments use, and private sector in particular. For example, the full immersion experiences. You know, I think about, you know, thinking about Indonesia, the kind of cross-functional tables that you were bringing together. You know, there are examples of that in the private sector that work very well. Whether that's rotations of staff to actually move people through so they can understand that the knowledge that they're bringing in, how that's actually used in its source form. So putting people in different positions and bringing them back. Also creating more explicitly cross-functional teams. Companies like General Electric and Hallmark do things like that. So a second lesson beyond making it personal for me is thinking about the incentives and paying attention to the mindsets and the culture that kind of promote that knowledge sharing to work. So in civil society example, there's an organization called Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation that grants research grants to people that are willing to share all their information. And they've given out a large amount of money. They've been able to put a number of successful drugs through FDA trials in the US, and demonstrably faster than other organizations, through the construct of saying, you know, we will give you money only if you're willing to share information. And I think there are interesting lessons for how governments, in thinking how they might work with each other, what are the ways in which you might create skin in the game? What are the incentives? What are the mindset things that might make it easier for governments to share? The private sector has found a way to do that through financial transfer. But how might that look in the public sector? I think there might be some interesting models for us to explore. You know, and I guess a final thing is being comfortable in beta. You know, this is a situation where many people say we want the perfect solution. We have so much technology. How can we design the thing that will be most relevant for people? And I think one of the lessons from the private sector is if you wait to get the thing, you'll never get started, and the thing will have moved much faster than you can move anyway. So you have to start somewhere. So I guess another piece of advice I would give is that finding ways for the public sector, the private sector, and civil society to work together where there's a starting point and then iterating, learning to live in beta is important. You know, as one example of this, last December, McKinsey created something called the Innovation Navigator together with Princeton University and Overseas Development Institute. And the idea is simply to be a public and open repository of innovation examples. It's live. We haven't actually launched it formally in any form. It's at mckinnovate.com. We'd love your feedback. We know it's in beta. We'd be happy to work with organizations all around the world that are thinking about doing these kinds of things. It's completely free for people. The idea is let's put information out there that bridges the way that sectors can share information, and then let's make it better together. I think that's a key challenge. So I guess I'd leave you with those three things. How do we make it personal? How do we create skin in the game for people to share? And how can we learn to live in beta? But I'll give you a challenge. You know, in the private sector, there are great examples of companies that have been able to estimate the value of how knowledge sharing benefits them. So for example, one energy company was able to estimate that they had a 10% productivity gain from making better investments in knowledge sharing, and that translated into, you know, $100 million over a number of years and a huge return on investment for investors. Different things at stake, different things valued in the public sector. But to encourage more investment, what are the ways in which we can show the benefits of knowledge sharing? I think that doing that is extremely important to being able to catalyze the kind of cross-sector partnerships that we'd like to see here that can advance knowledge sharing to open government. So a challenge I would offer all of you, be happy to take your feedback after the session, you know, tweet at us, maybe we can discuss it here, is, you know, what would it take to create an estimate of value, to use evidence-based government that in a way that actually helps us advance knowledge sharing in a meaningful fashion in the public sector? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, so we've had a very interesting set of presentations with lots of interesting thoughts and food for thought. I'm now debating a little bit, so I really want to get very quickly to the active part, because we want to now start some knowledge sharing ourselves on what we can do within the OGP. But if there were burning questions for clarification only, let's not go in debate right now. Let's just, if there were burning questions for clarification, something that was not understood, or where you just need some an additional bit of information about the presentation, let's take those now. Oleg, you had one. Please, maybe we need to use microphones if this is being taped.
This works for you, the OGP networking mechanism.
One, let's take two more if there are, otherwise we'll move to our brainstorming session. One other question out there? No? So why don't, for the question was for? So have you used the OGP? You know that the OGP has a network mechanism in place, right? And so in a moment, we'll have a short video about it. Maybe what we want to do, let's show it first, and then we can answer the question. So the OGP has put in place a networking mechanism, which is the goal of the networking mechanism is to actually start making this knowledge sharing possible in a more systematic way. So there's a quick video about this, and then we'll ask the participants here how their countries have used the network mechanism, if at all.
Hi, I'm Nicole Anand.
And I'm Abhinav Bahal from Global Integrity. Global Integrity is an innovation lab that produces research and technological tools for civic, private, and government reformers pursuing increased transparency and accountability reforms.
As a part of our portfolios, we manage the OGP networking mechanism, which some of you may be familiar with and some of you may not. So we'd like to take the next few minutes to tell you a little bit about what exactly the networking mechanism is and update you on what we've done thus far.
The OGP networking mechanism is a facility for OGP governments to connect them with leading experts on open government issues. These experts range from private, government to civil society organizations. This facility can be used by governments to help them create more innovative stretch OGP commitments as well as implement their action plans.
On the supply side, things have been going really well. We have had conversations with over 80 supplier organizations from around the world, and suppliers are continuously expressing their interest. If you are part of an organization that could provide expertise in any of the areas of open government, and you haven't already done so, we encourage you to please visit the OGP website and fill out the supplier form. Once you do, we'll get in touch with you and formally put you on the OGP roster.
On the other hand, demand from OGP governments to be matched up with suppliers has been a lot slower process. Demand has been trickling in, but a lot more can be done. So we urge you to get in touch with us and we can connect you to experts who can help you out with their action plans or can help you actually implement specific projects under your action plans.
Through the networking mechanism, we have put 8 OGP governments in touch with supplier organizations to date. In January, we facilitated introductions and were on initial phone calls between the government of Israel and 5 different supplier organizations. 3 of these conversations touched upon aspects of public participation, and 2 dealt with citizen feedback mechanisms for improved public service delivery. In many of these cases, materials were exchanged between the government and the suppliers to elaborate on specific discussion points.
In February, we connected the governments of Canada, Lithuania, Moldova, Philippines, and Croatia with experts on our supplier roster. February also marked the beginning of 3 affinity groups in the areas of public financial management, open data portals, and public service delivery. Affinity groups are clusters of OGP governments that have indicated similar OGP commitments as part of their action plans.
To stimulate further interest in the networking mechanism, we have launched a webinar series to provide the affinity groups with tailored presentations from experts on their topics of focus. Global Voices kicked it off with a presentation on public participation.
Subsequent webinars have focused on citizen budgets hosted by the International Budget Partnership, as well as ICTs for citizen engagement and open budgets hosted by the World Bank Institute.
March marked the launch of the searchable networking mechanism supplier roster on the OGP website. It's there for your quick and easy reference, so if you haven't already, check it out.
Thanks for listening. We're excited to see what comes out of Brasilia, and we look forward to working with many of you.
Feel free to send us your ideas on the networking mechanism as we move forward. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, very good. So back to the question, I guess the 3 first panelists, Stella, Miguel, and Prayoga, have you used the network mechanism? Who has experience using the network mechanism? Stella, go ahead.
Yes, we have used the networking mechanism for developing our action plan. And the next priority is to work together with Global Integrity and our internal local stakeholders on the implementation. So this will be the crucial priority for us.
Any other experience here? of using the networking mechanism specifically?
I think a short answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think a short answer to that is we haven't used OGP networking mechanisms a lot, but indeed we have used the webinars. I think one or two webinars we attended. I haven't attended the webinars myself, but some of my colleagues did attend that, and we found it practical because I think it's a quick knowledge boost, let's say, for us to implement open government back home. But the thing that I want to say here is that there are, I mean, for countries like mine, there are alternatives to OGP networking mechanism. So OGP networking mechanism for us is not the only single provider of, let's say, knowledge or practical examples of best practices. And indeed, we are quite overwhelmed by a lot of parties knocking on our doors. This is coming from NGOs, universities, private sectors, offering their a range of proposals, from basic capacity building into a quite sophisticated system. So I think we have to understand also the environment there, I think. Yeah.
Okay, this is very useful. Thank you. So you want to have a quick remark? And then we'll go to the audience.
En nuestro caso no hemos usado los mecanismos de redes y de trabajo, esencialmente porque no hay uno para sociedad civil. O sea, no es...
Okay, the one for civil society is missing.
Pero me parece, al menos es mi impresión, que el encuentro que describí que tuvo lugar en la Ciudad de México de hace aproximadamente 3 semanas tuvo básicamente el mismo objetivo.
Yeah, so one of the events you described, or one of the mechanisms you described, is actually something fairly similar. So we're seeing a number of things coming up. So we've heard about the innovation navigator that is being implemented with McKinsey as well. So we've heard about your mechanisms, the networking mechanism of OGP. There are a few more here. I heard that OECD is doing something. Can you give us just like the headline version, like 1 minute, and then Marcus, you also have one, and then we'll just to give us a flavor of the kinds of things that are going on.
I wanted to comment on your initial learning, and I think it's important learning. But I think that with the financial crisis, OECD countries have also sort of taken a big slice of humble pie, and there's a real desire to open up the discussion so that it's not just internal among OECD countries. And so right now we are in the process of developing an OECD innovation, Observatory of Innovation in the Public Sector. And so there's a working group that's been designing this. The issue is that, at the meeting we see there's a lot of cases of innovation, there's a lot of interesting practice. The issue is how do you identify it, how do you adapt it to make sure that it fits to the purpose of the country, and then how do you diffuse that practice. So I think there's a fine line between doing something that's overly academic, as I think we should avoid, but also something that allows us to compare apples and apples and oranges and oranges. And so that is what the working group is doing. There's a 16-country steering group that is in charge of the rollout of this, and then we just presented it last week to OECD countries, but we also had Indonesia, South Africa, Russia, and India at the table. So I think just shows that there's a real desire for this discussion to be broader than just OECD countries.
Okay, very good, very interesting. Marcus, the headline on what you're spearheading?
Yeah, as Eric said, we're living in a beta situation, so we have a beta version of what we call Open Government Experience Locator, that is a collaboration between the World Bank Institute, but also Global Integrity, IBP, and the OGP Support Unit. And we have selected only one topic for the moment, it's on open budget. The idea is, as was said here, to summarize very long academic reports into less than 2 pages to explore the appetite of practitioners about those cases or experiences and link them with the actual champions that implemented the reforms. People don't want to read long reports, but want to learn and talk to the people that implemented the reforms. So it's more like summarizing long academic reports, the key implementation challenges and success factors, and then link them with the people that implemented those reforms in other countries so they can have that direct connection.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. So I'm seeing we're coming to our brainstorming now, actually. So, and we'll have opportunity to share. Just one moment, please. So there are lots of initiatives going on. There's an enormous opportunity for knowledge sharing. There's a lot of demand for knowledge sharing. many of the initiatives we are seeing are at the supply side, priming the pump, so to say. Some notions here that on the demand side it's not always easy. Some get overwhelmed with proposals. Others who are developing mechanisms have a hard time getting to the demand. On the other hand, the action plans, in a sense, are demand for learning. So I think a question for us now, and I would like to use the next 10 minutes or so to do a knowledge exchange or do a knowledge exchange method amongst us. So it's called buzz groups. We will get the time to respond. So I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor, and maybe you can do it in groups of 3, and really introduce yourself to each other so that you get to know each other, and come up with an answer to 2 questions. Yeah? Having listened to all this here and seeing the opportunity for knowledge sharing, the first question would be, what would be the 2 top priorities that we as a group can do to scale up knowledge sharing within the OGP? What would need to happen? You've heard about certain initiatives, you've heard about problems, demands, the types of learning that is useful. What can we do? 2 ideas that you can brainstorm about in 5-10 minutes, and then we'll harvest, and we'll also get time for other comments as well. And then the second question would be, what can you do to make that happen? We have 2 colleagues here, Thiago there and Marcus there, who are going to hand out pieces of paper, and the idea would be that you write one idea on one piece of paper. They're handing out material to write, and so we'll collect them in the end. The idea is that we will then summarize it somehow and have some sort of an action plan for knowledge sharing if it all works well. Make your ideas very practical, and really turn to your neighbor or do it in groups of 3, say hello, say who you are, and brainstorm for 5 minutes on these 2 questions. You. For the second question, from your perspective, who you are, what can you do to make those ideas happen?